Hello, and welcome to the Apostate Alliance, episode number 12, with my fellow host, Faye Rahman, Faye the Most Gracious. And today's guest, we're taking a little bit of a departure, as we often do from time to time, away from ex-Muslims. And today we're talking with former Scientologist Chris Shelton. And this should be a very good show. Both Faye and I know very little about Scientology, but just having talked to Chris for a few moments before the show, he's got all the deets for sure. And want to, as we say, oh, go ahead. What's that? Oh, okay. Maybe I was getting some feedback there. I thought somebody wanted to jump in. Anyway, the Apostate Alliance every Sunday here on The Rage, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, U.S. The Apostate Alliance is where you can be free to not believe, and you're joined by three non-believers today. Now, we're going to get into the interview here with Chris, but I want to just real quick give you a preview of our upcoming guests. We're joined by Chris today. Next week, we're going to be joined by ex-Muslim Haas, Haas, Hass. I'm always afraid I'm pronouncing that wrong. He is at MOHD and a bunch of numbers after that on Twitter. Can't remember off the top of my head. And then just the way the schedule worked out, the two following Sundays, the 19th and the 26th, we're going to be joined by former Christians. I put the word out and had several responses from Muslims, and then we have some more Muslims scheduled, ex-Muslims, I mean. But yeah, two Christians for the 19th and the 26th of this month. Oz of the Atheist Roundtable, and if you're not if you're not subbed to that channel, please check that on YouTube, the Atheist Roundtable. They do some good stuff over there. And then on the 26th, we're going to be joined by an ex-Christian that I've mentioned on this show before when we were talking about, people the Christians that don't read the Bible and Muslims that don't read the Quran and all that. We're going to be joined by Kyle Curtis, former host of the Non Sequitur Show. And then we need someone for the 2nd of August, and we have a few scheduled in August, ex-Muslims. But if you're interested in coming on, reach out to either me and Faye. We need someone for Sunday, August 7th. As we often do, we're going to talk about something that I was made aware of. We saw on Twitter the other day. People ask apostates of all religions, well, if you don't believe that stuff anymore, why are you always talking about it? Why do you take these religions to task? I mean, you don't believe anymore. And the fact of the matter is, there's in all religions, there's fundamentalists that are, doing horrible things and like that. But for the vast majority of all religions, they're just regular people. And when we go after a religion, we're going after the ideology. We're going after the people who are doing the most harm and are the fundamentalists and, doing the horrible things. But we in no way advocate, hating every Christian or hating every Muslim or doing harm to any of those people, because the vast majority of them are just people living their lives that have a belief that we disagree with. But on Twitter the other day, somebody shared a story that came out of Pakistan. There was this young lady that was stoned to death. And this is the kind of thing that happens in fundamentalist Muslim countries. Now, I don't know we don't have very little details about it now, so I don't know exactly what Sharia law that she broke. The person I talked to about it just said that it was an honor killing. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to share a couple of images here. The first one is just a normal human being. And this is a young lady who lost her life because she violated and I'm just going to say it, some crazy Sharia law that probably had something to do with, As a matter of fact, now that I'm talking about it, I do remember he mentioned that what the belief is out there is that she was honor killed because she was in a video with a man. So you some of these laws are just the craziest thing. Okay, like we talk about how if you're an atheist you can be killed. We talk about how they'll take gay people to the top of buildings and throw them off. Here, this young lady, beautiful young lady, had her whole life ahead of her. Just because she was on screen with a man, they took her out and they stoned her to death. And here's the aftermath of that. They couldn't even show her whole face. I'm sorry to share this, but people need to see stuff like this, because these are the horrible things that are happening around the world. You know, as atheists here in the Western world, we're not subject to stuff like this, but there are millions and millions of people out there that are. And this is what she looked like after they stoned her. When I first saw this, it brought tears to my eyes. They couldn't even, keep her whole face uncovered at the funeral. They demolished that young woman. And I can't even imagine what the last moments of her life were like. But we share these things because this happens out there. And a lot of people in Western countries, they want to deny that stuff like this goes on. And it's happening, around the world in 2020. There's even, Muslims that live in westernized countries whose families take them to Muslim countries to do horrible things to them, like FGM and, make them marry somebody and, and things of that nature. But no human being should have been put through what this young lady was put through. And the idea that just because she was on screen with a man in a video, that she should lose her life. I'm sorry. I can respect people's beliefs, but there's some beliefs out there that deserve no respect at all. And I want to throw it over to my fellow host, Faye, to hear her thoughts on this. And then if Chris has any thoughts too. So
to comment briefly on there's like a number of things that I wanted to talk about. The Sharia law aspect of it. So the punishment of stoning is only specifically mentioned in terms of adultery, and it is something that is undertaken by a government body, and that's how it's going to be used. When we talk about honor killings, and we talk about it is essentially vigilante justice, that the family take it upon themselves to redeem their honor by culling a member of their family who's caused a sense of dishonor. And honor killings aren't necessarily a part of Islam, as in that it's not prescribed by it, but these violent and very scriptural methods of punishment sort of encourage violence, and at least plant the seed of violence in people who, you have to make an example of someone who breaks a rule. And it's no secret that in the Islamic religion, or in Islam, I'm like at a loss for words, in Islam, that women are treated as eye candy. Like every single part of their body is seen as something enticing in some way. So even if the original rule is about adultery, a married woman sleeps with another man and there's meant to be 4 witnesses or whatever the hell, even if that's where it started, it does kind of fall down a slippery slope of this family just being, well, this woman is publicly being seen with a man on screen in the video, and everybody's talking about it and everybody's speculating about it. There has to be some way of redeeming honor to the family. And this is the method that they took. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is the actual notion of stoning. I think that when we talk about stonings, a lot of people don't really understand what it is, because it's a really archaic way of punishing somebody or killing somebody. Like, you don't see it here in the West. It is primarily used in Islamic countries. I've never even heard of another culture using stoning as a punishment. So when we talk about stoning, what we mean is that a whole village including the perpetrator's family, will be standing around them while they are buried up to their shoulders or up to their waist, and they will pelt them to death with stones. It is an extremely gruesome and long way to die. In some Islamic, like in history, in some Islamic states, the way that stoning was done is that the executioner would take a massive stone and just smash them on the head once, which is merciful compared to the other way. But the way that it's undertaken right now in the Islamic world is this sort of public shaming as well as gruesome and drawn out death. And I just wanted to clarify that because I don't think people understand it when we say that these things happen in those parts of the world. So
Yeah, I never heard how you described it as far as like them being buried to their waist or their shoulders, and as far as the history of it, where you say just one, blow to the head with a heavy rock would be still horrible, but that would be more merciful than having to be pelted with small stones until you're dead. And it sounds like a mob mentality thing, like that, like in the history of this country where people would show up to hangings because that was the entertainment or whatever that week. Somebody was getting hung. And Chris, is this anything you'd like to comment on or?
I mean, beyond saying that it's disgusting and horrible, I don't really know what else I could contribute to the conversation. I mean, I've done podcasts about honor killing and the the atrocities of the human rights abuse aspect of it. It's as I understand it, it's cultural as much as religious, and it's awful. It's an awful practice. It's barbaric, and it doesn't really have much of a place in the modern world. But we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. As a species, we have a lot of work to do. And I will link to that tweet in the video description. And I would ask people to go to that tweet, share it. Like I said, there's a lot of people out there in the Western world in denial about this. These things happen, and the more people that learn about it, the harder it will be over time for these things to happen. And now, of course, we're here today to talk with Chris. My apologies if we kind of brought you down to start the show out, but I've been enraged about that ever since I saw it. So channel is the rage. So I thought we could open with a little, as Chris put it, disgusting thing that's happening in the world. But today is about Scientology and about our guest, Chris Shelton. And at the end of the show, we'll allow him to tell us where we can find him in different venues and social media and that, and we'll link all that in the description as well. But we want to get into the Scientology here. Me and Faye know little about it, so we're going to prompt Chris with some questions and then let him, talk as much as he wants about this, because I'm very fascinated by what I do know about Scientology. The first question I'd ask you, Chris, is this something that you were a Scientologist because your family was in Scientology, and so you grew up in Scientology as a child?
Yes, correct. I was a second generation Scientologist, which is a phenomena that is starting to be only in basically the last few years have sociologists and psychologists started recognizing that second generation cult members or second generation members of high control authoritarian groups are actually a thing. And the treatment model and the way you go about dealing with people who were raised in these groups is different from the way you would treat or deal with somebody who has gotten in voluntarily on their own accord, right? Because it's a whole different mindset. And so, yes, I was raised in Scientology.
And, as you talk about the difference between, having come to the religion or being born into it. And, that's why I've heard a lot of people say that those kind of decisions, maybe we should wait until children are, grown up and able to make their own decisions. But, you get indoctrinated into it as a child. That's all you know. So you grew up in Scientology. just go ahead and just take a few moments and just give us a thumbnail of what Scientology is all about, you know, as far as their you know, the underpinnings of the religion.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
not just
Go
that,
ahead.
I would also want to ask, paint us a picture of who Chris Shelton is, because I had, like, when John told me about it last week, well, he had said Chris Hansen, and I was very
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I didn't know Chris Hansen was a Scientologist.
yeah. She
but-
thought I was having the guy on who goes after predators.
I'd never heard of you, so can you paint us a picture? Like, who are you? What did you come from? What do you? That would be interesting to know.
Sure. So I am a former Scientologist. I was raised in it. I got out in 2012. I was involved with Scientology for 27 years in terms of actively doing it as a religion, and 25 of those years I worked for the Church of Scientology. There are various levels to it, levels of indoctrination, levels of responsibility. So I moved up that ladder. We can talk about the specifics of that if we get into it. Basically, the last 17 years of my experience with Scientology, I was full-time, flat out, didn't do anything else but Scientology as what's called a Sea organization member. Sea as an SEA, the Sea organization, which is a paramilitary group within, which forms the core of the Scientology organization. So did that for the last 17 years of the experience. When I got out in 2012, I still was a believer in the dogma or the faith or beliefs of Scientology. That all got sort of, I was exposed to the information on the internet in 2013 once I actually stopped working for the church. And that's what convinced me that I had been part of a destructive cult. And I had no idea. While all those years, I knew that there were really, really bad things that had happened to me and that there were things that were wrong with the organization, but I had no idea how far down that rabbit hole the truth actually went. And that's what I learned in 2013. It took me about 3 months of just dedicated, you know, like late nights. You know, like, wow, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about this. I'd never seen South Park. I had never heard of Xenu. All that time, that word had never come up. That whole story had never come up. You know, a whole bunch of stuff that I did not know about. And the reason I did not know about those things is because of the very effective information control and behavior control that occurs in Scientology. So, and again, we can talk about details of that, but I just didn't know. So once I did learn, okay, it was a whole new world. Started speaking out in 2013, first anonymously and not under my own name. I did not appreciate the degree with which Scientology monitors things about itself online, how there are people who are just dedicated to figuring out who new critics are. And they figured out who I was based on some of the stuff that I had said. And what's that?
Thought police?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
We actually call them Facebook police.
Oh, wow.
They exist.
All right.
Yeah, they do monitor Facebook groups. They're very rabid. The information control is not a joke in Scientology. And anyway, so they figured out who I was. I got busted. It is a crime in the world of Scientology to speak publicly against it. It is literally in their justice codes. They have these written out. And I was busted, so to speak, and I was, you know, sort of given an option of what to do. I tried to cooperate. I tried to play nice with the church because I had, at that time in 2013, I had a fiance. I had, you know, these connections with Scientologists that I wanted to keep. And I yet had this mental, you know, shift of not believing in it anymore because I only learned all about it. But I still was connected to Scientologists. My whole world was Scientology. I mean, you don't do something like that for decades and, you know, not have all Scientology friends, all Scientology, you know, it's like that was my world. And suddenly that wasn't my world. And I tried to cooperate. They disconnected me anyway, shunned me. It's called disconnection in Scientology. And so by the end of 2013, basically a year after I had stopped working for the group, I was cast out completely. I was exiled. It's called being declared a suppressive person, an SP.
Wow, the language is very
There's a lot of loaded language in Scientology. Loaded language is a characteristic of destructive cults, and Scientology is heavy on it.
Yeah.
So,
it's really soft compared to what the actual action is. Complete shunning. It's to call it a disconnection is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, exactly. The loaded language is like I said, it's quite intense in Scientology. Words are redefined.
Yeah.
So I was declared a suppressive person. It's a formal process. There's literally a piece of paper with my name on it that lists my crimes and all the reasons why I am no longer a Scientologist in good standing and must be shunned. And those reasons pretty much equate to, summate to I spoke out publicly about it. And everything else, then they'll claim that, they kick you out and all this kind of stuff, even though you're the one who's leaving. They always have to make it out that you're the bad guy. So that's what happened in December 2013. And suddenly I no longer had any Scientology friends or connections. Fortunately for me, very, very fortunately for me, and in fact, one of the things that had enabled me to stop working back in 2012 for Scientology was that my parents had already gotten out. Although they had not made a big ruckus about it. They had what we call slowly faded. They'd gone under the radar. And they had divorced years before and remarried non-Scientologists, and I still had maintained relationships with them. It's just that because they had kept calm and chill about it, they hadn't, made a ruckus. I was able to still maintain communication with them. And most especially my mom was very, very helpful to me during that year when I was, going down this rabbit hole of truth about Scientology. I was like, oh my God. And I learned, for example, I watched the South Park episode as part of that journey. And this was shocking information to me. I'd never seen anything like this before. And I asked her,
and just real quick, sorry to interrupt, but tell the audience why it is you didn't know about that. We were talking before the stream which I was surprised by. I think you said that only something like 5% of Scientologists are even privy to that information.
Yeah, that is correct. Scientology is a gradual series of indoctrination steps. And when you first come in, you're at step 0. And then, you climb this ladder of indoctrination called in Scientology the quote unquote bridge to total freedom. And you're crossing this bridge to a new level of existence, right? And that's the promotion of it. But really what you're doing is becoming more and more thoroughly indoctrinated into what Scientology is all about. And the South Park episode is the sort of secret information that's given out at one level called OT3, OT level 3, which is a fairly high level. It takes years to get there. It costs a lot of money to get there. And I had never gotten to that level as a Scientologist. I got up to a level called clear, the state of clear, which is a sort of a mid-range level that you want to get to. And then from there, you launch into these higher levels called the OT levels. And there are 8 of them. That's the highest that you can go in Scientology right now is OT level 8. So 3 is the one that talks about Xenu and the intergalactic overlord who committed genocide here in 76 million years ago.
I'm so sorry. I am so lost.
Because you've never seen South Park.
Did you ever see the South Park episode about Scientology with they're going after Tom Cruise and John Travolta?
No.
Okay, good. So let's walk it back. So,
Yeah,
because I'm throwing you into the deep end right now.
Yeah.
So let's walk it back a little bit. Let me first actually say something that I really should have led with, since it sort of clarifies the whole thing. Scientology is a money-making scam that uses religious cloaking in order to hide its true purpose and gain legal protection and First Amendment protection so that it can continue its racket.
I was going to say, it sounds like an MLM, like a
actually
marketing scheme.
Yeah, no, that's what Scientology actually is. Okay, at its core, it's about making money, and it's about enriching and giving power to one individual. First, that person was L. Ron Hubbard. Now it's David Miscavige. So if you ask, well, what is Scientology? Well, that's what it is. Now, if you want to ask, okay, what's the religious cloaking? Well, it's pretty intense and it's pretty extensive. There are the body of Scientology work consists of about 26 basic fundamental textbooks, probably a total of about 40 or 50 books altogether, and about 5,000 lectures that L. Ron Hubbard gave from 1950 through to the early 1970s. There's a lot of material there. There's thousands of pages of issues that Hubbard wrote as well. All of it describing a therapeutic, quote unquote, therapeutic process of counseling, which they call auditing, and training services, where you learn what L. Ron Hubbard said through his lectures and his books by studying it in a classroom environment. And they have checklists or check sheets of actions that you take. You read chapter 1, and then you write an essay, and then you do this and you do that, and they have these classes that you can take where you study Hubbard's materials, and you learn how to become a Scientology auditor so that you can do the auditing. Those are the services that Scientology offers, and it sells the books and the lectures. So that's the business model of Scientology. Those are the services and materials that's what it does.
Yeah, I was going to ask if all this material is publicly available.
Oh yeah, it's a ton of this stuff. You can get it in bookstores. You can go to the library. They've flooded libraries with their materials. Not the Xenu stuff. Now again, there's a certain level where things become confidential,
right?
And you don't have exposure to that information. It's not publicly available. Now it just so happens it's all over the internet because it's been leaked. But within the world of Scientology, there are very, very strict rules of behavior, and one of those rules is that you do not, under any circumstances, go on the internet and look at any information of a confidential nature or of a critical nature. And the thought policing that occurs within this group is very effective. And we can get into why it's effective. There are many, many mechanisms at play there. It's not just one threat is made to you and then suddenly you don't go on the internet. There's a behavior modification that they do in Scientology to gain compliance for Scientologists. And the threat of disconnection is one of those techniques, but there's also other things going on.
I mean, they can throw up the story of someone like you to the members and say, see, look what happens to you if you go down these roads. Chris is being moved.
What my family tells my cousins about me. But go on.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I am persona non grata within the world of Scientology. And prior to all of this going down, I had been like I said, a Sea Org member, a professional Scientologist for 25 years. I had worked with thousands of Scientologists over those years. I had a good reputation. I was somebody who helped people. I was an all-around good guy up until the moment that I started questioning what was going on. And once I started speaking out, that was it. It was game over, right? And then I had to be gotten rid of, and I had to be silenced. And that's what the whole suppressive person declare is all about. Is it's about silencing you. And Scientologists believe that if you are declared a suppressive person by the church, that clearly is proof that you are an antisocial personality. You are a bad person, And Hubbard makes comparisons in his writings to SPs are, Dillinger, Napoleon, Hitler. I mean, the Jeffrey Dahmer. These are SPs. These are bad people. And now I'm in that list of people, right? So Scientologists don't want to have anything to do with me, won't listen to what I say.
Yeah.
So that's just part of the picture. But trying to get back to the overview, and me, I was a Scientologist. I grew up in it, and I took part in it, and I went all in on it, and I became a true believer. And I really, really, really thought that what I was doing was contributing to saving the world. There's a whole, party line in Scientology that what they are doing is the single most important thing in the world. There is nothing more important than Scientology. And I believed it. I was dedicated. And it took a long time for me for the sort of seeds to get planted for me to start doubting what was going on, and finally wake up enough to get out of the group, and then wake up enough to get all the way out. And that's basically was my journey. And so ever since then, 2014, I started my YouTube channel and started making some videos and doing some writing and figuring out how to talk about this and what should I say. And that's my channel. That's how I started. And for the last 7 years, I've been producing video content. I wrote a book about Scientology as a critical analysis of the subject, not my memoir. You won't get my story in there. You just get what Scientology is, and who L. Ron Hubbard was, what these OT levels are all about. I think I did the most thorough breakdown of that you'll find anywhere in writing. So all that's in my book. And I've been speaking out about it ever since.
Real quick, from the live chat, Theo wants to know, since you started your activism against Scientology, have you, received any, pressure or criminal threats? Have they continued to go after you?
Yes, they have. You can find if you Google me and go down the list enough, you'll find a hate website about me. You have my ex-wife trashing me on video. That's fun. That's always fun to experience. And a bunch of lies told about me. And that was kind of interesting too, because to read about, they know everything about me to a ridiculously intimate details, because through the method of confession within Scientology, you tell them everything about yourself. And I was involved for decades. So there wasn't anything about my life they didn't know. And then
even like some of your deepest, darkest secrets?
Yeah, no, everything.
Okay.
Everything. I'm not kidding when I say that. Everything. So every single person you've ever had sex with, all your masturbatory practices, how many times you've had drugs or alcohol and what you've done, every school you went to, every friend you've had, all your family members, what you think about them, everything. Eventually, it all gets written down in files as part of your auditing processes, as part of what they do when they're doing their auditing stuff with you. So they have all that information about me. And then what they put in the hate website is a complete alteration of all of that to make it look 10 times worse, right? They take out all the little nasty bits and exaggerate it, lie about it. If they can't find anything nasty enough, they'll just make up stuff about you. That's what that hate website is, So
what is the name of the book that you wrote about Scientology?
My book is called Scientology A to Z, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about.
Great.
And can that be ordered off of Amazon?
It's on Amazon as an audiobook. I recorded my audiobook version. There's a ebook and written hard copy text.
Well, and we will definitely get those links in the video description. I think I know what my next read's going to be.
I think it'll answer a lot of your questions.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat also asked, and I was going to bring her up too. We were describing how they, basically excommunicated you and made you persona non grata. I was going to say, well, they went full Leah Remini on you, because of course they went after her. Did you ever meet Leah Remini?
Yes, I did. Leah's actually a friend of mine.
Oh, really?
I was on the show twice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I was on Scientology in the aftermath. I was on the first season, and then I was on the season, the last show of season 3. And Leah's show is an Emmy award-winning documentary about Scientology, and I got to consult on that show on the first 2 seasons. It was a wonderful experience. Leah and I are actually the same age, got out the same year. We're both in the Sea Org, and she went the celebrity route, and I kind of went the staff Sea Org route. So we had different Scientology experiences as far as that goes, but our timing was kind of oddly parallel in terms of getting out and stuff.
Oh, there must be all kinds of conspiracy theories about that.
Oh, wow.
Leah's awesome. And by the way, what you see of Leah on the show, that is her. She is exactly like that. But the day after I was on the show is when the website came out. So they had been ignoring me. What's that?
The day after?
Yeah, the day after. They had it already. They had it rocked, man. They were ready to rock on me. And they didn't do it until I showed up on her show.
So much like news outlets have people's obituaries written in advance before they die, they were ready for you to come out in public and smear you. That's right. And up until that point, they had publicly ignored me, but they had been trolling me, hacking my computer, hacking my, I have to deal with this crap all the time. I just 2 weeks ago, I got hacked. So it's, this happens. These guys just, are annoying. The tactics they use are bullying, third grader level mentality kind of tactics. There's a lot of history there. Just the history of how Scientology goes after its critics is its own show. Right. There's a lot there. There's a lot of history there, and it's a very sordid history. Scientology does not play. They play very dirty pool. Wow. So let me ask you this real quick. I have a couple questions for you, actually, but let me start by asking. So how is it that someone like Tom Cruise, in the bit of research I did on this, he left Scientology at one point, and got away from it? How is it that he was accepted back into the fold if he... Oh, no, you can get back in as long as you're not publicly trashing it, right? I mean, Tom Cruise didn't go out and start talking shit about Scientology. Can I swear? I'm sorry, I did it. Oh, yeah, you can swear all you want. Didn't ask you about that beforehand. What happened was Tom Cruise got involved in the 1980s. He married a woman named Mimi Rogers, who was a second-gen Scientologist and who's also a celebrity. She was an actress, and she married him, got him into Scientology. He credits Scientology with curing his dyslexia, which I can guarantee you it did not do. And then he divorced Mimi. When he did Days of Thunder, a movie, he met Nicole Kidman, fell in love with her, married her. Well, her dad is a psychologist, a famous Australian psychologist. Scientology, by the way, hates psychology and psychiatry. Another whole story there. And through the 90s, Tom and Nicole, through their marriage, kind of started, disappearing from Scientology. Like, they got involved. Tom got her in. She was doing some Scientology. She got up to, I think, the OT level 3, in fact. I think she raced up to that level, which is pretty unheard of. Generally, it takes a while to get there. It still would have taken her more than a year to do it. I mean, they were involved for a while. But then he kind of did a slow fade, and he sort of disappeared from it for a while. And then in the late 90s, he was basically enticed back in and was, sort of gotten back into the fold. And David Miscavige took a personal interest and became very buddy-buddy with Tom Cruise. And they actually became best friends, started hanging out together all the time. And suddenly Tom Cruise was, kind of giving Nicole the side eye and not really, hey, I don't know if I really trust her anymore. And they had adopted a couple kids, and Scientology basically convinced Tom Cruise to dump Nicole, keep the kids, get them fully on board with Scientology. And then a few years later, in the early mid 2000s, actually went on a Scientology mate hunt
and found Tom Cruise a new wife, and that was Katie Holmes. Until she escaped from him, because she woke up and went, "Holy cow, this guy's nuts!"
And mate,
got away. What's that? Yeah, they actually went on a hunt within the world of Scientology to find Tom Cruise a woman.
oh my God.
Yeah, that
That's
happened.
another excellent scene from that episode, or maybe another episode. I can't remember where she is trapped with other people on Tom Cruise's property, and all of a sudden the power goes out, and her wrist, ankle bracelet with the, like criminals wear when they're under house arrest broke, or it went off, and she was able to escape, from Tom Cruise's clutches. But
yeah, I hadn't heard about the ankle bracelet part, but yeah, she did have to. She literally, Katie Holmes had to orchestrate an escape from Tom Cruise. She didn't force him. She had to orchestrate with her family getting away from him in such a way that he would not be able to stop her. And it was quite a little dramatic story. I mean, when it all went down, it was, it was sort of reported in celebrity media. So it's kind of like, but I know Scientology, and there's no question in my mind that she had to escape from that situation. And now, of course, this is one of the reasons why Tom Cruise shuns his own daughter. He barely sees her.
Yeah.
And this is why, because he hates Katie and will never, ever forgive her. I mean, there's no going back from that. When you have to escape from the guy's life, you're not eager to,
And did she escape Scientology as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She was absolutely getting away from him, getting away from the whole sordid scene. So I don't know how much she actually wants her kids seeing Tom. Which is probably a factor as to why he's not seeing her so much. I think Katie has something to do with that too.
To move away from the celebrities for a second, because I kind of wanted to talk to you about your experience. Mm-hmm. You said that there was there's a difference between people who are like brought into the fold and then people who are like sort of raised in it, and you're a second generation Scientologist. Mm-hmm. So what was your upbringing like? Like what was it like being a child of Scientology? What did that involve? How is it different from normal childhood? Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to tell you a few Scientology beliefs in order to contextualize this. So the basic dogma of Scientology comes down to this. You are a spiritual entity. You are not your body. There's your personality, the experience of you that you have on a day-to-day basis is you as a spiritual entity called a thetan. From the Greek letter theta, you stick an N on it, and it's a thetan, right? And that's you. You're not a ghost. You're not a spirit. You don't have a soul. You're a thetan. So it kind of removes all the extra baggage connected with those other words. You invent a new word for it. A thetan is a spiritual entity that has no mass, no wavelength, no location in space or time. It's not a physical thing. It exists outside of the physical universe. This whole universe, everything we occupy is like a playground in a way. It's a place that was created by us in order to have something to do, in order to have a game to play 4 quadrillion years ago. Okay, this ridiculously long amount of time ago, this physical universe was created by all of us collectively. And this is not day one dogma, by the way. I'm telling you stuff that takes years to learn. Mm. The thetan part is day one stuff. They'll tell you that right off. Mm. The physical universe being 4 quadrillion years old, that's OT3 level stuff. So I'm mixing and matching this stuff to tell you what they believe, okay? And the dogma is you're a spiritual entity. You have lived in the past billions and trillions of lives. This body that you have is just one of trillions that you've had in your time, playing around here in the physical universe. And you're going to live forever. There's no killing you. Your body will die, but you won't. You can't. There's no way you can ever die. So your existence, though, has been a steady decline in your cognitive abilities, in your spiritual abilities, because you've been trapped. You went from playing a game in this universe to becoming trapped in it. You went from playing dolls, so to speak, to thinking you are the doll. Right? This is because now people here on Earth are, no, this is me. This is who I am. I'm just my body. And when my body dies, I die. And Hubbard's like, no, that's all nonsense. You're going to keep going. And you're going to be compelled to go get another body and another one and another one. You're trapped in this endless cycle of life after life after life. And he sort of made, very Western-minded comparisons to Buddhism and stuff, this endless cycle of life after death. It's not reincarnation as such. It's more you're stuck in this system where you're sort of hypnotically compelled to go get another body when your body dies. You have to go to the hospital and pick up a baby body and carry on.
It sounds like the Matrix.
The scientists love the Matrix.
Okay.
There are two movies that Scientologists just love: Star Wars and The Matrix. And the Star Wars, because what does every Star Wars movie begin with? A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It's the past. Star Wars is all the past, not the future. And Scientologists believe that the past looked an awful lot like that. That you've lived on other planets, that there have been intergalactic civilizations. It's not all just been here on Earth. So your past lives can include magic and technology and space opera and anything you can imagine, even other dimensions. Like all this stuff has happened in the past and it's made you who you are now, which is an enslaved spiritual entity who is so traumatized by all those billions of years of experiences that you don't even acknowledge you are a spiritual being anymore. You've degraded down to the level that you think you're a body. Like, how pathetic is that, right? So, because you're really a god. Your capabilities as a spiritual entity, if fully realized, would allow you to create your own physical universe. You would be that powerful. That's the rehabilitation that Scientology eventually promises you will get by doing all these indoctrination levels, which is why people spend all the money, take all the time, have to navigate this labyrinth of nonsense that they have to go through as a Scientologist. And because they believe that they are regaining their advanced spiritual abilities and personal immortality, their personal sense of immortality, that they will be able to live into the future and not forget all of their past lives. One of the little tricks of this trap that you're stuck in is every time you assume a new body, you forget everything that happened to you before. It's all still there to be remembered, but you knowingly and actively forget it. Because you don't want to remember all that bullshit from the past, right? You want to start your new life on a fresh, clean slate, right? And so you start this new life and you conveniently forget everything, and you've been programmed to forget it. So Scientology claims, L. Ron Hubbard claims, that his method, the auditing, is what opens the door to you remembering your past lives, remembering all those past experiences. And in fact, the highest level of Scientology, OT level 8, is promises that you will regain a freedom from amnesia on this whole series of things that's happened to you in the past. You'll remember everything. You'll be able to remember everything.
And do Scientologists, are there Scientologists that claim to have their memory restored and remember these past lives? And
yeah, I used to.
I'm so uncomfortable because I can see how this is appealing. Like, I get it. I understand it. It sounds like such a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
But,
and I'm giving it to you in the cool way too, because usually what they start with is, they don't start on day one. When you walk into a Church of Scientology, they are not telling you this stuff. What they tell you on day one is, look, you have a problem in your life. A communication problem usually is the problem, or a relationship problem, or a study problem, or a work problem. Well, guess what? L. Ron Hubbard figured out all these amazing solutions to all the problems of life. We have a class that you can take. This is what wrangled me to start with. I was a 15-year-old high school student who couldn't get a date, was totally nerdy, always had my nose in the book, right? Could not talk to girls. And I walk in there and I do their personality test, and they sit me down and they go, wow, looks like you're pretty shy, pretty introverted. Looks like you have a hard time getting dates, right? Here I am, this nerdy little 15-year-old bespeckled kid going, really? Yeah, that's right. Like, it was so obvious. You know, and I thought I was, I thought I was, you know, keeping all this stuff really secret. And they just read me like a book. And then the test evaluator says, we have a class in communication that you can take, and you will no longer have those problems talking to girls. You will no longer have a shy, introverted sort of persona. You'll be a cool guy. And I was like, really? And sign me up, right? Take my money, shut up and take my money. And I signed up for that communications class, and that's how I got started. So I didn't get started on any of the spiritual stuff. You asked earlier, though, in terms of second gen, and I'm just bouncing around here a little bit, but in terms of my second gen experience, I grew up being told all the things I just told you about me as a spiritual entity. My mom and dad told me that stuff, not L. Ron Hubbard, right? I grew up thinking as a 7 and 8-year-old that I was an immortal spiritual being and that my body was just a body, right? I thought my brain was just a switchboard between me as a spirit and my body. The brain didn't have any other significance than that. My body is no big deal. So that was my entire worldview growing up. And there's other things too, which we can get into, I guess. It gets a little complicated, a little fast, but there were other things that in Scientology, it's mind, body, spirit. So you are a spirit who is using a mind to control a body. So the mind is another aspect of this, and Hubbard has a whole thing about how the mind works, and that is what Dianetics is all about. It's the modern science of mental health, and he wrote it in 1950, and that book is where he laid down his ideas about the mind, and he hadn't gotten into the spirit yet. That came a couple years after. So it started with the concepts about the mind and how we can improve your mind and make you think better. And then by 1952, it was about the spirit, the thetan. And then Hubbard kind of grew this methodology and this mythology connected with the spirit, using the mind to control the body. And Scientology addresses the spirit, Dianetics addresses the mind. And between these two things, this is how you do Dianetics and Scientology with the auditing.
So speaking of the mind, I want to. We kind of glossed over a point that I'd like to hear a little bit more about.
Yeah,
you said that you yourself came to be one of these people that remembered past lives.
Yep.
Now, of course, now you know that was all something that you made up in your head.
Correct.
So, tell us a little bit about what you thought your past lives were and why you think you came to this conclusion. Whether it was just all because of the indoctrination but go ahead.
Well, auditing is about, as you do the Scientology auditing, you're gradually indoctrinated into this spiritual belief. You can't really get very far in auditing if you don't eventually start looking at yourself as a spiritual entity. And in fact, the auditing process itself is supposed to help bring that belief about by convincing you through your own subjective experiences that you have lived before. And the way it works is you are asked questions that start with asking you about present time problems that you're having or issues that you're addressing. You know, you're having a hard time talking to your wife, let's say, right? And I'm having these communication problems with my wife. In fact, I'm having communication problems with people. Good. Let's do some auditing to address communication. So you might be asked questions about difficulties tell me about difficulties you have talking with a spouse. And now the question, you notice, is worded in such a way that, and this is just one of, I could give you thousands of examples. There's lots and lots of ways auditing is done. But here's one example is you might have a question like, recall a time you had difficulty communicating with a spouse. Now, I'll answer first telling you about my current spouse. Yeah, I had a fight with my wife last week and it was really hard. She was yelling at me. I was yelling at her. It was all kind of silly. Ha, ha, ha. But there's not really a full relief experienced yet. You talk about it, but it doesn't really kind of snap away for you. So the auditor then will ask you, is there an earlier time you had difficulty communicating with a spouse? And you go, earlier time. Well, yeah, there was this fight we had last year. All right, tell me all about that, right? Da, 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 da. They tell you all about it. I tell you all about this fight I had with my wife last year. It still is not totally snapping out. I'm still not totally resolved on the whole thing. Well, is there an earlier time you had difficulty communicating with a spouse? And, oh, yeah, well, let's see. I didn't have a spouse before that. Well, keep looking. Is there an earlier time you had difficulty communicating with a spouse, right? Earlier time. Well, let's see. Well, I kind of get this picture of an apple. Really, an apple? That's interesting. Something about this apple connected with a spouse? Oh, well, I don't know. I just have this picture of an apple flying through the air. Oh, you know what? I think I threw an apple at my wife one time, but it wasn't my current wife. It was this other lady. And you start developing this like a Polaroid picture. And this ends up becoming a past life incident when you threw an apple at your wife 500 years ago.
Leading questions and in a way it sounds weirdly therapeutic, but at the same time it's like a mind fuck, right?
Exactly. It sounds therapeutic. It sounds like it would make sense if you buy into the idea that you are a spiritual entity and you've lived before. It makes perfect sense. All you have to do is buy into that one idea that you've lived before, and suddenly anything is possible.
And then they can just prompt you.
That's right. And then you're asking questions.
Prompting your imagination, basically.
Exactly. That's it. You nailed it. You got it. That's the simplest way to explain it. And Hubbard's mythology is complicated, and he's got a whole cosmology connected with all of this. Xenu is part of that. That whole story is one aspect of it, but it's a deep, deep well, and there's a lot of stuff in that well of crazy to go down and learn about. And the more you learn about it, the more you're remembering stuff that is crazier and crazier. I mean, there's stuff I was remembering blowing up planets and genocide, 20 trillion years ago and stuff. I mean, it's really crazy stuff. But like I said, once you open the door logically to the idea that you've lived before and that you are a spiritual entity of near infinite power, then anything's possible. And if it makes you feel better, if you remember this stuff and talk about it and feel better, well, it must be true, because why would I feel better if it's not?
Yeah.
That kind of mindset. And once you start stepping down that road, you take one step and another and another. By the time you're at step number 50, you're saying and thinking things that you never imagined you would say and think on day one.
It must be so, not to give credit to this horrible idea, but it must be so freeing to be able to live in your own imagination like that.
Yeah, actually, because again, anything's possible. And the other thing, of course, is Hubbard was an awful conspiracy theorist. So
right.
There's a lot of junk that gets piled on as you get deeper and deeper into Scientology. And like I said, the cosmology is pretty complicated. I mean, Hubbard talks about past life invader forces, alien species coming to Earth and invading Earth, and Earth being caught in political battles and all this space opera stuff. Not all Scientologists really get super, super interested in that. Some people are like, yeah, okay, I just want to feel better. I just want to get better. I just want to, be more powerful. They don't really get into the story mode aspect of it. And other people like me get super interested in that. I was always doing deep dives and trying to figure stuff out and reading Hubbard's stuff and listening to his lectures and trying to learn all about it, because I was a big book reader. I was always a voracious reader. As a kid, I read thousands of books. I was really into learning stuff. So Scientology was just another set of of stuff to read. But I was under the impression, because my father, especially because my parents had raised me to believe that what L. Ron Hubbard had to say was actually true, was the literal truth. I never regarded Scientology's fanciful stories as science fiction. To me, that was fact. And that was how I was raised, was to contextualize it that way. And I couldn't agree with you more with what you said at the beginning of this thing about how religious belief is, childhood indoctrination is, for me, I've said it straight up, just a kind of child abuse.
Well, and here's the thing too, is it sounds like Scientology has, perfected the art of the manipulation of indoctrination. I mean, the idea that you could be made to believe all this stuff about past lives and be thoroughly convinced, and without the aid of hallucinogenics either. They're just, through their methodology, they're able to make you believe all this shit that never happened. And for you to, it almost like puts Scientology at a superior level of indoctrination above other religions.
I've been asked, and it's been said by actual professionals with letters after their name, that that Scientology is one of the most destructive of destructive cults out there. And by the way, the term destructive cult is used as a term. It's not, you have cults. Almost any group could be considered a cult by definition, but a destructive cult, we use that term as a description of a group that meets very specific criteria. And amongst the destructive cults out there, Scientology is one of the worst, because of the sheer volume of control mechanisms that are sort of built into the DNA of its writings, of how Hubbard put it together, and especially of how this auditing process is done. Because what I've explained to you about it is the very simplest surface level explanation of it. There's a lot more going on under the hood than just being asked some leading questions. Leading questions are one of the mechanisms, but there are many, many more, and there's an e-meter, this electronic device that gets used. There's a lot of stock placed on that e-meter, and it itself becomes a tool of manipulation. Because if you believe you're hooked up to an electronic device that can tell if you're lying or not, then you're going to be compelled to tell the truth. That's going to be something that's going to be, pressure in your own mind. What's that?
So abusive, though.
Well, it becomes that way because you are indoctrinated into Hubbard's way of viewing the world. And it's a pretty destructive way of looking at the world. There's some pretty nasty beliefs in Scientology.
Well, so check this out. So when you get hooked up to that meter, do they hook you up to the meter after they've convinced you that all these things happened to you in past lives, and then the e-meter validates the fact that, oh yes, you are remembering past lives?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because that thing I was giving you the example of with the Apple thing earlier, the way that would actually work in an auditing session is you would be sitting there holding these cans connected up to the e-meter, and the needle, there's a needle on a dial. And the auditor is sitting there looking at the meter, and he's got this needle that's moving in response to his questions. And if the needle responds in a particular way to the way an auditor asks a question, then it is assumed that there's something there. There's some electronic emotional charge that the meter is picking up that you might not even be aware of yet, but the meter does see it. And so I got something on this meter. There's something here, right? So if I ask you, okay, recall a time when you had difficulty communicating with a spouse. Boing, the needle responds. And the auditor's sitting there looking at it going, well, I got something here. And the guy goes, well, I don't see anything. And the auditor goes, well, let's take a look. And then the auditor's watching the e-meter. And if he sees the needle move again in a similar way or the same way, he goes, what's that thought right there? What's the thought you're having? When I said that.
Oh, that makes me feel weird.
Right? But it gives this e-meter, this electronic device, the power of divination. See, now it can read your thoughts, even that you can't read. There's something there, and we're going to develop it. Like I said, it kind of develops like a Polaroid picture. It's this sort of, oh, well, all I see when you say that is an apple. That doesn't make any sense. And the auditor goes, okay, well, tell me more about this apple. What are you seeing with this thing, right? Doing, yeah, that. What's that?
Indulge in your delusions. That's really fucked up.
Yeah, it develops delusions.
Yeah,
that's what it does.
But
and it's messing with you 24/7 because you come out of these auditing sessions believing that what you've remembered was real. You don't go into these things thinking you're imagining stuff.
Sure.
There is a kind of auditing that uses imaginary processes, but that's very, very, very rare. Most auditing is considered actual living memory that you're pulling up, from your past. And you're looking, and what's worse is you're not even looking for, nice times. You're looking for incidents of tremendous pain and unconsciousness and trauma and stress and anxiety. So you're digging up the worst memories. And in many ways, re-traumatizing yourself by doing so.
We got a little question here from the audience from our fearless leader on this channel, Nakasuchi. Chris, have you seen Nip Tuck? And if so, do they depict Scientology accurately?
I don't know. I have not seen Nip Tuck. I don't know what that is.
It's a show that was on FX or one of those networks.
Don't know. I mean, probably. I haven't seen too many. In terms of exposés about Scientology, I haven't seen too many that were grossly inaccurate. Sometimes they get details wrong or emphasize the wrong things, but generally, factually speaking, they get most of it right, if not all of it.
Just let me ask you pointedly. So now that you're out of it, do you think that L. Ron Hubbard believed this shit, or was he just a complete charlatan?
Both.
Both, okay.
Yeah, he was a con man and a believer. L. Ron Hubbard was a deeply troubled individual. His own personal writings, which were never supposed to see the light of day, reveal a very, very troubled soul, who also had megalomaniacal sort of aspirations. He wrote in his own handwriting, he wrote about how he wanted domination over other men, how he wanted to be, this amazing guy to women, how he, would be, believed and listened to. And his ultimate goal, according to a letter he wrote his wife back in like 1938 or something, was to slam his name into history. He wanted to achieve immortality by having people never forget who he was. So, and there's a whole crazy project going on within the church I could tell you about, which is a whole nother show about how they are doing that exact thing. They are doing there's a whole project to make sure L. Ron Hubbard's name never disappears from the history books.
Wow.
So he was quite, he was quite egotistical, and he was a very narcissistic man. That term tends to get overused these days, so I'm trying to kind of avoid using it anymore. But anyway, he fit the bill in a number of ways. There's also evidence that he might have suffered from something called temporal lobe epilepsy, which is an actual physical lesions in your temporal lobes, which causes religious fervor and fervent belief. So there could have been physical reasons for some of his behavior as well, but we'll never know. His body was cremated within a day of him dying, but there is a lot of symptomology consistent with a temporal lobe epilepsy diagnosis, and that's something that unfortunately he wouldn't have even been able to be diagnosed with through most of his life. They didn't even know about most of the symptomology till the 80s, and he died in 86. So he's a complicated guy. It's not a simple thing. It's not a black and white. He was just a con man, and Scientology was just one big long con. Some people have characterized it that way, but if you look just a little deeper, you see it's not that simple.
To bring it back to, because I kind of want to focus on how the indoctrination sort of changed you and made you, because you said you were devoted in it and you worked for 27 years in the organization, and I wasn't even aware it's been around for that long. Like, I'm 25. I'm so confused by all of this.
Yep.
But what I wanted to ask is that because you were raised in Scientology, you were a second generation Scientologist. What was that like? Because you also mentioned only having Scientologist friends and, surrounding yourself.
Not as a kid. I went to public school.
Okay.
Grew up in Pasadena, California.
But because religion is also part of schooling, people learn about religions and things like that. So when you brought these queries home and stuff, what was, the reaction, like when you first learned about Christianity or you first learned about any other religions? Like, what were your parents' reactions to you learning about stuff like that? And did you have any curiosity those ideas ever as a child?
Yes, of course I did. Like I said, I was a very voracious reader. I was an incredibly inquisitive kid. I was curious about everything. But I also was told from a very young age that L. Ron Hubbard was the purveyor of truth and that Scientology was the truth, capital T. So I wasn't looking to other religions or other faiths for answers. I was curious about what they thought, but only from the point of view of, not only, but kind of mostly from the point of view of an arrogant sort of, oh, that's what you believe kind of thing. I roll, right? Because I know the truth, right? And this is just standard religious indoctrination. I mean, pretty much this is the experience for most kids who are indoctrinated in religion. I did check out the Foursquare Church. There was a youth group when I was in high school that a friend of mine was in, and we went and, I went to some youth pastor service meetings and stuff like that. I went to a couple of the main hall services and found them incredibly boring. Went to Bible camp for a weekend, that was kind of fun, but pretty boring. I wasn't really very impressed by Christianity. And Hubbard, at this point, by the time I was 15, I started taking classes in Scientology, like actual official classes at a local church in Santa Barbara, California. And at that point, I was hearing Hubbard directly in his lectures bad-mouthing Catholicism and Christianity as a whole. He considered that they were control operations and that organized religion was just...
There's some irony.
Yeah, right? Here's the power of that. I mean, this is actually, you wouldn't think about this as a control mechanism, but think of the framing. If I tell you that group is a control operation and they're just suppressing free thought, what does that make me? A purveyor and defender of free thought. Because I'm pointing out the oppressor.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm the opposite of it.
It's called pulling out the other.
That's right. It's little things like that are all throughout the writings. It's subtle. This stuff doesn't hit you over the head all the time. Yeah. And that's why it's effective.
Something that seems kind of genius to me too, okay, is that, all right, here you're being exposed to these Christian ideas, but you've already been told, you know what, you're an eternal being already. You're just borrowing this body. And now you hear about Christianity, and the ideas of Christianity probably sound pedestrian to you after the story you've been told. And here Christianity is the promise of eternal life if you do this, that, and the other. But you've already been told you're an eternal being. So
that's exactly right. And in fact, we were told that all of Christianity, I mean, this is pretty crazy, but part of the Xenu story, and this does filter down in other ways through Scientology literature and through Hubbard's writings and his lectures. You're given the idea that all of Christianity is actually an implant. And an implant is something that is done to you as a spiritual being in a past life to sort of hypnotically implant you with ideas that you will then be forced to think are true for the rest of your existence. And this is right. So all of the whole God devil paradigm, angels, demons, crosses, the rosary, you know, all these machinations, all these symbols and things that make up the Christian religion, Hubbard claimed were hypnotically implanted into you millions and billions of years ago to control you and make you see the universe through this lens so that you will be a good little Thetan and you won't get up to no good and you won't go destroying planets or you know, blowing up things and making trouble for the invaders, the bad guys, the big bad guys. So, you know, so Hubbard's cosmology involves a lot of back and forth of wars of meat body civilizations, us, versus the Thetans.
Meat
right? Well, that's right. That's how Hubbard calls this, right? Meat bodies. Because it's not, I know, it's awesome, isn't it?
Like this. So, I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but like this sounds like such a cool nerd religion. Like I would
telling you, this stuff is it aligns with Hollywood so much. It is awesome. Like, for example, give you another one is Hubbard, you know, allowed for. I mean, he's writing all this stuff in the 50s and 60s is when most of this stuff is first put down. And then you look at science fiction and you look at something like he talks about meat bodies having a you know, a biological body, but you could also have a robot body or a doll body, he said. So then you go, well, what would that look like? And Scientologists look at each other and go, yeah, you ever see Terminator?
Oh my God.
Right? like I said, once you open the door. What's that?
You're ruining these movies for me.
I know, it's awful. Because once you open the door to the idea that you're a spiritual entity who has lived before and can assume control of any kind of body,
fucking anything is possible.
Anything's possible.
Oh my God.
And here's the best part is Hubbard actually said out loud in one of his early lectures that most science fiction writers are just writing their memories.
Oh, that is fucked up. Why?
Right? So you as a Scientologist now view all of science fiction as possibly real from millions and trillions of years ago. And again, if we've all been around this long and the universe is as big as and infinite as it is, who's to say none of this is possible? I mean, you become rather credulous.
Oh, and they're appealing to like nerds and like people who maybe aren't as extroverted, and that is so sick because like these are the people who want all of that to be real as well. I mean, I don't want to generalize, but coming from that background and then seeing like other people who are very like-minded, like we're the kind of people who want to believe that shit. It's fucked up.
Right. That's right. And here's a whole cosmology where you can. And the best part is that's not even the good part. Like that's all interesting. But the real goal with all of this is not to get into the lore. It's the lore is what happened to you. And that's why you're so, you know, basically why you're so fucked up these days.
Yeah.
But the real goal and the part where things get really, really bad is, you know, that you need to get past, you need to remember all that. You need to do this auditing processes and stuff because you're so screwed up, you don't even know how screwed up you are. You need this Scientology bridge more than you could possibly imagine. And so a great deal of pressure is put on every single Scientologist to pay the money and do the services, get up those levels of indoctrination as quickly as possible. And Hubbard has many writings within the dogma that talk about how we don't have an infinity of time to do the job. You know, the world could blow up at any time, and if we lose this chance, we've lost it forever. Scientology in all these trillions of years is the only thing that can free you from this infinite trap. Nothing else has worked in all this countless trillion of years. This is the only chance you've got. So you better take it, and you better not lose it, because there's no other group anywhere in the universe where you're going to get this technology, where you're going to be able to do the auditing and get free. So even as fantastic and crazy and wild as all this mythology or cosmology is, it's just another framing to pressure you to pay your money.
It's just a submission technique, yeah.
It's all about convincing you that you are more screwed up than you could possibly imagine. And the only way out is L. Ron Hubbard's closely, you have to closely follow his path of escape out of this place.
So,
talk a little bit more about the. Oh, I'm sorry.
You also sorry. Right, John. I just have and I'm trying to stick to one thing, and then it's coming 100 other things. But you said that when you were a teenager, you would go to these
I told you guys this was going to be hard to do, didn't I?
Right. I mean, before we got too far past it, what I was trying to ask, though, is you talk about the money, and you've mentioned that several times. What, how much money do you think you spent on that religion during your time in it? Okay,
well, I'm glad you asked that, because actually that opens the door to a whole nother room of awful. I did not spend a lot of money on Scientology, and the reason is because I gave them my life. You can expect to spend anywhere from $350,000 to $1 million easily doing the levels, and also donating, buying the materials, donating more. They're really big on straight donations now. They just want to take your money for their so that they're saving the planet kind of stuff. They've got a lot of what they call social betterment activities and projects and stuff that they want you to donate to, as well as paying for the services that you need to do, the auditing services. Auditing is sold by the hour. So it's not a fixed thing. It's not like you pay me for 50 hours of auditing and I'm going to get you to OT3. It might take you 300 hours, where it might take somebody else 200 hours. So I can't give you a fixed, this is how much every single Scientologist pays. It's variable. It depends on you. It depends on what a good person you are. It depends on how much you toe the line. It depends on how loyal you are. Because if you stray from the path, let's say you go look on the internet one day and you see something critical of Scientology, you go into your auditing and you say, yeah, I read this article. They're going to be, you shouldn't have done that. And now we're going to have to ask you all these other questions, and it's going to cost you more time, which is going to cost you more money. That's another way that's one of the key ways they control you from looking on the internet, is because it's going to cost you a lot of money. The auditing is sold by the hour. It's actually sold in blocks of 12 and a half hours. It's called an intensive. You buy an intensive and you get 12 and a half hours of auditing. That is supposed to be delivered to you within a week's period of time. That's why they break it up that way. An intensive of auditing can cost you anywhere from $3,500 to $6,000, depending on the kind of auditing you're getting and where you're getting it. If you get it in...
So they don't even hide the cost. Like with a lot of religions, they kind of hide the cost in donations and charity and stuff like that. They don't even hide that. That is, wow.
Yeah.
It's bold.
And you get into a mindset where that's a bargain at half the price, right?
Right.
But yeah, that's how it works. And depending on the level,
like modern capitalism, like this is an amazing idea.
yeah, there's a whole business model here. This is not a religion. This is a business.
Well, right, and I was just going to say, so not only do they have the cool story that, as Faye said, appeals to the nerds, they've got the expert marketing campaign, and so they suck you into the story, and then, like you just said, oh, what a bargain! I mean, I would have paid even more for that.
Exactly. Like, somebody's saying it's a Ponzi scheme. It's not a Ponzi scheme. Ponzi is a different model altogether. This isn't about investment and getting return on investment. This is about just giving over money to the church, and they provide you with services and materials. So it's more of a business model. And you could get away with saying it's a pyramid scheme, but I just wanted to clarify that for the commenters.
Yeah.
But it is bad. I mean, there's nothing good about any of this. But it's business disguised as religion. It's business with First Amendment protection and with legal recognition of them as a religion. So technically, legally, they are a religion. I call them out as not being that because look at this business model. You don't have to go to, when you go into a Catholic church and you want to confess your sins, you don't have to pay before you go in and start talking to the priest and laying out, your conscience. In Scientology, you do. And the donation rates are fixed. You're going to pay X amount per hour. You're going to pay X amount for a book, X amount for a course. They call them donations, but it's a business.
Yeah. Hey, so you'd wanted to go down another rabbit hole here a minute ago, or stay in the same rabbit hole. I want you to do that, but I want to ask you this question. Do you feel like we've been talking to this man for 90 minutes? Because I think I feel like
when we do this show, we normally focus on like how you actually left, but I feel like we've been focusing the whole show on just Scientology.
Yeah,
and it's making me very uncomfortable.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable. I'm sorry.
It's a me thing because like all this time, because I come from a Muslim background, Islam has its bases covered. Like it has its bases covered. You ask a question 99 times out of 100. You get an answer. There is an answer for everything. I very rarely come across a religion or a business scheme, because that's what all religions are anyway. Some of them just been around for longer. I very rarely found a religion that is so grounded in its ideas. Like when you have Christianity, you have concepts that aren't easily explained. You have Trinity, you have the Eucharist, you have the body and blood of Christ and all that nonsense, right? Like It's not very, very easily explained. And for a very, very long time, I thought Islam, it's a bunch of bullshit, but it's got all of its facts straight. Like it has its story straight. I very rarely come across an idea that stands up to that, and that's what's making me uncomfortable, is that Scientology, for all its nonsense, has its story straight. And it's like weird.
Yeah, it is. It's and I'm explaining it to you, of course, in a way that it makes it all look pretty consistent and stuff. When you dive into the details of Scientology, you find contradictions up one side and down the other.
Of course, yeah.
And I'll give you a really blatant and obvious example to make the point is the church, any religion must have a creed in order to be recognized under 501c3 tax exempt status, right, by the IRS. You have to have a creed. So this Church of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, wrote a creed. And in the creed of the Church of Scientology, it specifically states, let's see, all men of whatever race, color, class, creed. What does it say here? All men have inalienable rights to think freely, write freely, talk freely, their own opinions, or counter, order, or write upon the opinions of others. Okay? Freedom of thought, freedom to write, freedom to, counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others. So that's in the creed. You get to think whatever you want, write whatever you want.
That's not
Right
demonstrable.
up until the moment that you're critical of Scientology.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And you get the boot. So here you have this beautifully worded creed that says that we believe in the inalienable right to think freely, write freely, talk freely. But if you practice that right on Scientology, you're out of here. And that is one of the most fundamental contradictions of that whole outfit. And there are the contradictions are legion. They are rife throughout it. So it's not actually a well-integrated, well-oiled machine, but it makes the surface level appearance of it makes it look that way. And I just wanted to stress that because I wasn't sure from what you just said whether that was clear or not.
Well,
So-
I mean, I think all religion has its contradictions, but on a surface level, it does seem to keep that appearance that it's very well grounded and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that is what was kind of freaking me out.
Yeah, it was easy for me as a member to quiet the cognitive dissonance that would occur when I was presented with contradictions, because I could always sort of rationalize or justify my way through it and figure out some Scientology writing that would trump the contradiction so it would make it make sense. But now that I'm a lot more objective about the whole thing, I can see that that was just nonsense.
And it's also the appeal factor. Like, I find myself being appealed by it, and it's really weird because I'm known to be quite skeptical and loud, and here I am just quietly sitting and listening to you talk about it, and just like, you know, like it's fucking with me.
Yeah,
I don't like it.
And I haven't even tried to sell it to you. I've been totally honest and upfront about it. I mean, I could have worded this in a much tamer way when I was a Scientologist. I wouldn't have told you half of this stuff. And made it sound very, very appealing, because at the public level, at the introductory level, it's all about a tool set that you can use to improve your life. It's not about Thetans and intergalactic wars and all that bullshit and Xenu. No, I don't know about any of that. Scientology is practical. Scientology is a tool set for your life. Scientology will make things better for you. That's what it will do.
Sure.
You know, that's how they talk about it.
So we're not on the dawn here of you converting back to religion, are we, Faye? No, okay, all right.
No, I am just like,
I do have this wonderful book by L. Ron Hubbard. I think I should sell you, and maybe you should read it.
You know what? I'm already broke as an ex-Muslim, and my life is under threat, so I don't need that.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to express is that, like, this, I very rarely come across an idea that is so involved in people's lives, because Islam is the same way, where it's like super, super involved in your life, and it's sold in that way. Like, there's something wrong with you, and you can use this as a band-aid to cover that gaping fucking bullet hole in your life.
Right.
And I've just very, like, even when people talk about Christianity, it's just hooey, it's just nonsense. That people are like, oh, you know, you can invite Christ into your life and he can be your best friend. But, like, what does it actually offer you? Like, what do I do? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Those are the things that aren't expressed by other religions, at least I feel like. Whereas with Islam, it's like, you can do this in the morning, you can do this in the evening, you can talk to this person. Like, it integrates and it pervades every single aspect of the way that you live. And it's just giving me, like, I think part of it is PTSD, and some of it is just like, why am I so appealed by this? Like, why do I feel this kinship to this idea? And I kind of get it. And part of it is all the nerdy stuff as well, like the Terminator and the Matrix and the Star Wars and all of that stuff, because I love that stuff. And the fact that it integrates that, like, that was something that was actively shunned by Islam for me. Like, I had to give all that shit up.
Yeah.
But I don't even
embrace your inner nerd as a Scientologist. That is for sure.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing too: is as you think about the time that L. Ron Hubbard came up with all this, that was really big, like in movies and television. You know, the space stories were very rampant, you know, in the 50s and 60s, you know, as far as entertainment goes. And there was a lot of people that were claiming that they had, you know, sighted aliens or been, you know, what do you call, not indoctrinated, but what is it when the aliens take you? I forget what that word is. the people who think that they've been abducted by aliens.
Right.
Oh, yeah, abductions.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Being kidnapped by aliens. Yeah.
Um,
Well, also, the 1950s was a time of a big explosion in cultic thinking. This was post-World War II. UFO cults were a thing. McCarthyism was revving up, you know, the anti-communist sentiment, the us versus them thinking across the country. We had just entered the atomic age. I mean, the promises and hopes for the future were never brighter than they were in the 1950s, but then danger lurked on the horizon, you know, around every corner because there were communists everywhere. So it was a wild time, and there was a big cultural explosion of this kind of group of UFO type cults and thinking, and Hubbard just glommed onto that and put this Dianetics thing out there and said he had figured out mental health. And as crazy as that sounds right now, contextualize it, and it actually,
I get it. Like, that's why I'm laughing, is that I get it. Yeah.
1950s psychiatry was guys in lab coats, you know, shooting you up with lithium and doing lobotomies.
And lobotomies, yeah.
You know, there was no pharmacopoeia of good pills for you to take. There was no understanding of one-on-one counseling. For, you know, counseling was still Freudian in nature mostly, or Jungian archetypes. I mean, this stuff that was just going way over people's heads. They didn't think that they had a resource in their local psychologist or psychiatrist. They didn't trust them. They didn't know who these people were. So Hubbard comes along with this handbook that says anybody can read this, and you can sit down with somebody else and you can work out your mental issues. And post World War II, there were a lot of people with a lot of issues, and the idea that they could sit down in their own living room and sort it out had a huge appeal. It was a legit bestseller, and that's what started this whole thing, was Dianetics.
I remember a copy of that book being in my house as a child, you know, and luckily my parents never ventured down that rabbit hole. Who knows where I'd be right now if they had.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, my parents did. And that's how I ended up sitting here talking to you today, is because they did go down that rabbit hole.
And speaking of your parents, I've been wanting to ask you this. Okay, you alluded to earlier that once you decided that, wow, this is crazy, I need to get out of this, and you said your mother was very helpful to you at that point. Now, prior to that, when they had left the religion, did they attempt, before you came to the conclusion on your own that you needed to get out of Scientology, did they ever attempt to deconvert you?
No. And that was smart, because they didn't really know how, and they would have screwed it up. In fact, my dad did kind of screw it up a few times in terms of talking critically about the organization to me in such a way that it made me feel that I needed to double down on my belief. Because when you get attacked, you double down. You don't go, oh, hey, good point, let me change my mind, right?
Yeah.
That never happens. So so that was kind of what happened with me, is I was aware that they had sort of faded and were not really doing services so much anymore. But they had also gotten very, very high up. I mean, my dad had gotten to OT level 7. My mom had gotten to OT level 5. They had both been trained as auditors. So they were not just casually involved with it. They had gotten pretty deeply involved. So I figured, well, eventually they'll come back into the, you know, do more services. But at least they still think about things as Scientologists. At least they still see the world as Scientologists. And so I was sort of able to reconcile their departure that way. And they, of course, watched me get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. I mean, we haven't even really talked about the Sea organization, but I mean, that's a crazy outfit. And I was all in. It basically, without getting into all the details, let's just say if I was a Catholic, it would have been the same thing as me joining a monastery. That's how deep I got in.
Well, you called it a paramilitary organization, and that made me think of ISIS. So
yeah, not guns, but they have paramilitary in that L. Ron Hubbard was in the Navy.
Okay.
And he modeled his core group, which he started in 1967, around the Navy. And so we had ranks and ratings and uniforms and yes, sir, no, sir, how high, sir. And we had dorms, and we had dorm style living, and we had a main mess where you were served food, and you didn't wear clothes, you wore a uniform, right? You saluted, this was a very formalized structure, and that was the group I was part of for 17 years in Scientology. That was the last part of what I was involved in. So I was hardcore. I mean, I was all in, and this stuff is very totalist. You talk about taking up every aspect of your life. So my parents watched me go all in that way, and they knew they couldn't just talk to me straight about it. They couldn't go, hey man, you're involved in something that's really bad. One, they got me involved in it, and two, I was all in, so I was as far in as you could get as far as, where my head was at. It was when I started, when cracks started appearing, and then I called them and was like, hey, I really don't know that this is what I should be doing anymore. I'm not happy here. This isn't really working out. And this was, I'm 42 years old now, and I'm saying this stuff finally. It had taken me 10 years to get to this point. And that's when my mom and my dad both said separately, I talked to them separately, and they both said, look, totally going to support you in anything you want to do, any decision you want to make. But my mom finally said the key words, which is, look, if you need a place to stay or a place to, to land, you can come here. And those were the magic words I needed to hear, because up until that moment, I wasn't sure I had a place to go. I wasn't sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And without a place, as bad as this is, I'm getting fed and I'm getting clothed. So at least I'm surviving here. If I go out on the street, I'm fucked, right? So what am I going to do? What job am I going to get? Who's going to hire me? Where am I going to type a resume? I mean, what am I going to do? I didn't have answers to those questions until that was presented to me. And then I was like, okay, good. Now I've got a place I can hit the escape button and restart my life. And that's basically when it ended up happening.
So, believe it or not, we've been talking for an hour and 50 minutes here. Almost. Which flew by. And here's the thing too. Like you have said several times, oh, and we haven't even really broken the surface yet, or things of that nature. So right. I hope that you're game to come back and join us again.
Absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, because there was a couple other guests we've had over the past episodes where we said we're going to have you back on because we didn't hear the whole story. And as a matter of fact, the last really long stream we had, the one that went with Heretic Nick, good friend of Faye's, we talked to her for well over 2 hours, and by the end of that, it was wait a minute, we still didn't hear the whole story. Exactly. That's the way I feel right now. Unfortunately, today I do want to keep it to like about 2 hours. So we got about 10 minutes left, and then we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Sure.
And what I'd like to do, we've talked about doing this. I started a Discord server. And so what I would like to do is have you on again, and then plan to have, a small after show afterwards, for a half hour, 45 minutes, where some of the viewers could come into the Discord and maybe ask you direct questions about Scientology.
Sure, no problem.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And you all really should check out my channel, because I think today I posted Q&A number 269.
Oh, wow.
And every single Q&A episode, I answer about anywhere from 7 to 8 questions. Most of them, not all of them by a long shot, but most of them about Scientology. Mm-hmm. And I try not to repeat myself too often. Anyway, there's a lot of content about Scientology, my backstory, the mythology, the beliefs, why it's a destructive cult, the control mechanisms. I mean, I've spent a lot of time documenting this stuff, and it's all on my channel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's also very inspiring too, because you got out, and that's kind of the message we're people to understand that whatever religion you're in, if you're having doubts, you can get out and you can live a full life. It sounds like it was very hard for you because, you know, like we say, that was your whole life. You know, you bought into it 100%, and it was a very brave thing that you did get out of that situation. And so just to kind of wrap things up, I'd like to, you know, throw it to you, Chris, and please tell the audience, you know, you mentioned your YouTube channel. If you have a YouTube channel, your book, if you've got a website, just, you know, tell us where everybody can find you.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me at mncriticalthinking.com is my website, where you can find most of my video content. Also, my podcast, sensiblyspeaking.com, has my Sensibly Speaking podcast, which I put up every week. And you'll find interviews with therapists, psychologists, sociologists, neurologists, former members of lots of different groups. I do a 3 Apostates episode every now and again where a former JW and a former Mormon and I will compare and contrast our experiences. So that's been kind of fun. That's been an ongoing series. And so then there is my book, Scientology, It Is Xenu, and that you can find on Amazon. And my YouTube channel is simply my name, Chris Shelton. I identify out there as the critical thinker at large because I think that's a more effective moniker than ex-Scientologist at large, and a little bit more embracive of what I'm actually about, you know. And in terms of my exit story, which maybe we can talk about a bit more next time, you have to lay all this groundwork of what Scientology is in order to contextualize everything. And that's why these things always go on forever. But my exit story has a lot to do with critical thinking.
Let me ask this real quick. Okay. You might remember at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that we don't have anybody scheduled for August the 2nd yet. Mm-hmm. Could we tentatively say that you might come on then?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's make it August 2nd, and then we will say to the audience and whoever watches this as a video, we will make that our premiere episode to where we'll have an after show and go to Discord and let the audience interact with our guest. So I'll write that down. That's really cool because I want to hear more, you know, but I don't have more time today to hear more. And it sounds like, you know, it sounds like to hear you describe it, that we could have even more than one more show about it. There's so much to it, you know.
There's so many questions I have.
Yeah. It's an endlessly fascinating topic that people always end up having, you know, boatloads of questions about. I have never, ever been on anybody's show where an hour was enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and here's the thing. I don't want to speak for Faye, but I would imagine you just got at least 2 new subs to your YouTube channel because I'm right over there.
Oh, I subbed while we were talking. So.
Oh, you did while we were talking. Well, I know that. Like Faye is so. We're having a show. I can only focus on one thing at once. And like during every show I've ever had with Faye, I'm getting notifications of her tweets and stuff like that. You know, so I'm not the multitasker she is. And Faye, please tell us about yourself and where people can find you and anything.
No. This is not about me. I need to take like 24 hours to just not do anything because my mind is just spinning. But yeah, you can find me at Faye the Most Gracious. That's where I'm at. We're trying to lay off some of the more strong political stuff, but BLM is still going, and that's something I support. So we will be talking about it every now and then. There's been a lot of complaints. Faye, you're too serious. Faye, you're too political. Faye, you keep getting in trouble. You know what you sign up for. You get what you pay for, and you pay nothing. So.
Well, and I hope I'm wrong, but Chris, I think you might have broke Faye.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, you know, get my book, take a look at it. It might help put things back together and put things into a sensible sequence for you so it's not too overwhelming, because it's an overwhelming subject. I'm telling you, I get it.
It is fascinating because I fully expected, like, it's probably the last thing I'm going to say. I fully expected to walk in here, you were going to describe Scientology, and I was going to be laughing the whole time. And I have no humor about this. So
Well, it was a little hard with the framing of the episode at the very beginning to enter into a sort of joking manner about all this. I've got enough time and distance from it that I can see the ridiculousness of it. But the truth of the matter is that, and again, we didn't even touch on any of this either, but there have been horrifying human rights atrocities committed within the Church of Scientology. And I myself was human trafficked.
Oh.
And I don't use that with hyperbolic intent. That's by the dictionary definition of that term. I was a slave for 3 years. So there's a lot of stuff to cover with this.
We definitely have to delve into that next time because, as a matter of fact, our viewers that are ex-Muslim, they will find that very interesting. Sounds like there might be a few parallels.
There's quite a few that I've noticed.
So, thank you so much for doing this. And I'm already looking forward to August 2nd because I want to hear more about this.
Right.
Please, everything that you told us about here in the last few minutes, DM me all those links as soon as you can, Chris, so I can get them up in the video description, so people can find your book and everything else you mentioned. As far as what I have coming up, of course, you find me and Faye here every Sunday at 11 a.m. Right here on Nakasuchi's channel, The Rage. Talking to apostates. Our main focus is, of course, on ex-Muslims, but as you saw today and in the past, we talked to apostates of all religions. Including Chris's information, we'll put another permanent link in the description to the Discord we started. Please join us over on Discord. We're going to grow that and turn that into more than something. And as far as what I have coming up, you might remember not this past Friday, but the Friday before, I was on with Randall Rouser and Scott Payeth, two Christians, and then Floyd FP joined us, and they had a discussion. Coming up later next week, Floyd FP and Randall Rouser will be joining us to have like a one-on-one discussion. There's a couple of different topics we discussed. I'm not sure which one they're going to delve into on that stream, but look for that coming like Thursday or Friday night. I'll tweet out more information about that as I get it. And something else. Nope, that's it. I thought I had something else, but I didn't. So thank you very much for joining us, Chris. Thank you to the audience. Maynard Saves was here. Theo Radically. Everybody that was here today. Free Spirit joined us. And it seemed like you guys were kind of listening to the stream at half an ear and had your own thing going on in the live chat, which often happens, and that's awesome too. So just remember, join us every Sunday on the Apostate Alliance, where you can be free to not believe.